The funny thing about my columns is my very first column focused largely on Lee Davis High School. Spike Lee had just put out the movie Malcolm X. This is 1992. And being the master marketer that he is, if you were alive in 1992, the landscape was inundated with people wearing X t-shirts and X caps and X pens, and it was just all over the place. So some black kids at Lee Davis High School started wearing Malcolm X gear, which did not please their white schoolmates, who responded with X gear of their own, which of course was Confederate gear. And it was a lot of drama. And I wrote about this, about just how we're living through this unresolved history here in Richmond. And it's just funny that, 29 years later, that all came to a head. And you could kind of chart the evolution of Richmond through that kind of conversation, where people start interrogating. Because we hadn't. I knew we should. I went to high school in Henrico County. I remember how we felt heading out to Lee Davis to play the Confederates, or heading over to Freeman to play the Freeman Rebels, and the kids waved the Confederate flags. I remember one of my classmates snatched one of the flags and cracked it, and the kid ran off crying. Ah! But it was tension. Yeah, we didn't like it. So, one of the more gratifying things about doing what I do is to see that arc, see that historical arc, to see things at first being questioned and then changing. On Monument Avenue, we went from, in my childhood and most of my life, not even thinking about the monuments, because they're just there and they're immutable, and they're not going to change. They're not going to be moved. They're not going to be removed. I lived almost right off Monument Avenue in some apartments, and drove down Monument Avenue every day to come to work, and just hardly gave them a thought, because they're just there. Did not spend much time on Monument Avenue, that's for sure. Attended my first Easter parade, I think I was in my early 30s. It just wasn't something we did. Didn't spend any real time on Monument Avenue until the 10K started, the Crops 10K. There was always an unwelcoming vibe. But to see us go from not even examining what this all means, and it's not going to change, to, hey, what can we do to make this more palatable? Well, maybe we'll put a statue of Arthur Ashe up. And that was done, and now that we've done this, maybe we can tell a more complete story by integrating the neighborhood, so to speak, and maybe we can add context. And there were all these things that didn't happen fast enough. And finally, George Floyd happened, and the impatience reached a critical mass, and people just took matters into their own hands. And there's a lesson there. I think I remember Tupac kind of describing it as people starting out marching and saying, singing hymns, and we shall overcome, and nothing happens, and they gets a little more edgier and edgier, and finally they're ready to break down the door, because people are human, and that's just the way we function. So that tranquilizing drug of gradualism has a shelf life before people are and that's something we just always seem to forget. But yeah, just seeing that evolution is I think why it's one of the more gratifying things of staying in the business as long as I have. You see that things can change, things can happen.